A serious injury to your brain can cause all sorts of medical issues, amnesia, blackouts, seizures. But this next strange affliction involves the libido. People who survive traumatic brain injuries only to find themselves with a new sex drive that's in overdrive. This is Alyssa, just Alyssa, no last names. It's that kind of story. She's 23, single, lives in Vancouver. Behind that bold blue eyeshadow, an ordinary woman with a strange tale of desire gone wild.
Did you ever imagine that car accident could so change the course of your life?
I think that as people, we'd like to think that our personality is a bit more stable.
And this is Heather, happily and normally faithfully married to her husband, Andy. They're from England. She, too, has a story that would make just about anyone blush.
Walking down the street for a while was hazardous.
She'd catch people's attention, you know, guys. She'd just give them a look.
I was never subtle with it. It was never subtle.
You were never subtle?
No.
It wasn't a come Heather look, it was a come...
Yeah, get it, look.
Two women, a world apart, with one thing in common, a brain injury that transformed them in ways both intimate and unimaginable. Trauma through a switch in their brains, supercharging their sex drive. Their story might be called 50 Shades of Grey Matter.
I think I was doing some gardening that day and I collapsed in the garden, and I can remember a huge pressure in my head and knowing that something was really wrong.
Heather's X-rated odyssey begins with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, massive bleeding in her brain. It left her in a coma for 2 weeks. Doctors were not hopeful.
They said it's not good and she's probably not going to survive.
During our interview, a moment of brutal frankness that shocks Heather. He tells us in a way he did lose his wife.
The wife that I married died on May the 21st, 2005.
That's really sad.
It's true, though.
It's not.
That's what happened.
Heather emerges from the coma with a voracious interest in sex, starting in the hospital.
So she wanted to have sex with you in the hospital bathroom?
In the shower room.
While she was still hospitalized?
Yeah.
After she was released, it only got better. That is to say, worse.
So what are we talking about, every day?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a day.
2 or 3 times a day?
It was emotionally hard, it was physically hard. It was hard.
You got sick of sex.
Not sick of it, but just sort of bored of the frequency of it.
And then one day, as Andy watches, Heather crosses the street from their home to pick up a construction worker.
This guy called her over and she went over. When she got to the doorway, he kissed her on the mouth and I was like watching.
She crossed the street and she's
Kissing with a
making
girl.
out with a man.
And I'm just watching thinking, what's happening there?
Heather begins propositioning and groping other men left and right.
She'd meet people and within seconds, she'd be offering them sex or even sort of having sex with them.
You look like such a demure, sweet young thing. I mean, truly. It's hard to even imagine you doing all of these things. Is it just an urge to have sex?
I think so.
Experts say brain trauma often causes a decrease in libido. Only rarely does it cause the opposite, what doctors call hypersexuality. Heather and Andy met with Harvard neurologist Dr. Alice Flaherty as part of a British documentary.
These things here are your temporal lobe, and a lot of this is what was damaged when I looked at your CT. This is where the aneurysm, the blood squirted out and hit this the most, and also causing damage to the hypothalamus, which is down in there, right in the center of the brain. Right up at the front of it is this thing called the amygdala. It's very important for fear. And I think you're more
what you were
fearless.
talking about,
you're more
wasn't
fearless.
it?
You're able to
Yeah.
approach things and do things that you wouldn't before.
Andy estimates Heather had sex with about 10 other men, but behaved inappropriately with as many as 50.
Heather at the time, she couldn't see that there was anything sort of out of the ordinary and that she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She was like, well, why can't I?
Didn't matter how old they were, didn't matter how handsome they were, it didn't matter how fit they were. It just mattered that it was a man.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the guys, it was about her.
It's like a sport, you know, going out and seeing if there was a...
Anybody around?
Yeah.
In Vancouver, Alyssa is also trying to manage a new sexual personality, which she traces to a car crash in 2008.
The car flipped over 3 times, I hit my head, and the next time I woke up was in the morning in the hospital.
She had been a typical teenager, she says, interested in fashion and sewing. Her experimentation mostly confined to hair color.
So you weren't boy crazy, as they say.
Basically, yeah.
And you'd had basically one sexual experience.
Yeah. with one guy beforehand.
But from this crumpled wreckage, Alyssa says she emerged a changed person.
So what did you begin to notice about yourself?
I was tired, I was depressed, anxiety, I was withdrawn socially.
The area of her brain injured in the crash was the frontal lobe, the part that controls impulses.
Everything needs a braking system. Everything needs some sort of control. And when there's none, it's usually a disaster.
That brake failure led to Alyssa's strangest affliction.
How much of your thoughts after this brain injury were taken up with sex?
It was definitely much of the day.
Scott Stanley is Alyssa's attorney.
Before the accident, she was just a normal kid, and then afterwards, she would use this expressly explicit language detailing sex and would say things that would just cause people to shudder.
This had to be such a big dramatic difference to be not really very interested in sex and then all of a sudden obsessed with sex. Did you suspect it was because of the brain injury?
I think at first I just blamed myself. I just felt a lot of shame.
Alyssa says she couldn't stop herself, but she couldn't enjoy herself either.
I don't necessarily physically actually enjoy sex all that much. I'm doing it to satisfy a compulsion. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel healthy because it's not.
Making a virtue of a vice, Alyssa now sells provocative videos of herself under an alter ego, Sasha Misery.
Listen to my voice.
Her sexual compulsion was cited by her lawyer as part of a lawsuit against the driver responsible for her accident. The judge awarded her $1.5 million.
The judge agreed with us that her increased sexual activity, her sexual impulsivity flowed from her frontal lobe brain injury.
She's in therapy and on medication and says just recently her sexual urges have begun to diminish.
So now you're not at a point where every waking thought is about sex?
Right now, knock on wood, no.
What she really wants now, she says, is someone to love. Heather and Andy's outcome may give Alyssa some hope. Heather's desire has been dampened by therapy and prescription drugs, sort of a pharmaceutical cold shower for her overheated libido.
Do you still have those urges, or are you just better at controlling them?
I don't think I have them so much at all now. But also I make sure that I'm not in a situation where there's only me and a bloke, you know. I just make sure that that never happens, really.
They're now celebrating more than 20 years of a marriage that truly tested nearly every vow. Some say it might sound fun or even funny at first, but could you live like that? Let us know on Twitter. Use the hashtag ABC2020.